Hello and welcome to All My Art and Soul. I'm Michelle Holden, and this week is Exploring Value with a Simple Color Palette, number 19. And as you can see, I'm gathering all my materials that I want to use, and I have finally found that yellow tape that some other artists use, and it is really amazing. The edge, the clean edge that it makes, and the ease that it comes off of the paper. But of course, I've gessoed this paper first. I've just used a very smooth approach to my gesso. And this one, after I decided to use some palette knife texture. So the dimensions of this particular page, let's see, is it an 11 by 14 mixed media Canson? And when I frame it out, it's roughly, I just measured it, 9.5 by 12. I think for framing, if you want to save money, sticking to some standard sizes, it's probably better. And if I was, I like this size, but to scan my images, it's I have to scan them in two sections and then meld them together with some Photoshop or other photo software, which I am just beginning to learn right now. So as you can see, I've decided, okay, well, let's add some texture. And thank you to a subscriber who mentioned, well, why don't you? So I thought, well, I don't know. Why am I not? I've got enough tools. I've got the catalyst wedge, the smooth wedge, which I love for these size pages. And so I'm just setting out some paint, still trying to put out enough paint so it's generous, but not have so much left over at the end. I just hate to waste. I don't mind wasting or having left over from a more inexpensive, but when it comes to my golden paints, they're precious, as all of you know. So having the yellow frame around my work, it didn't really affect me so much. I think once you get into doing your work, your page, you just sort of ignore all that anyway. So I'm showing you, I'm using the teal from Golden. And let's see what else I'm lining up here. Of course, just your Michael's black, standard black acrylic, which is perfectly fine for journal pages. Of course, the Manganese Golden, which is super transparent. I think I'm also using, it's plugged up. That's what I'm doing at the side. I'm using the teal from Liquidex, and it's the basics. They're a nice heavy bodied. And right now, it looks like I'm just thinking about slowing down, trying to be very present. And as you can see, I had to let the gesso dry thoroughly. Then I decided, okay, let's start with just pure manganese layer of the golden, adding water to my brush so it goes smoothly, and trying to get that all over evenness, because I don't know, I'm trying to learn how to paint flat. I don't know if any of you follow Adele Seipiston. I love her work. But learning to paint my own, of course, as we all should be, as we learn from other artists. And of course, we have some favorite mentor artists like Nicholas Wilton and others. So as I continue, I just want a nice even layer of manganese blue and just scratching through it just to keep that area flat. And I think I discovered another way. And then spraying the alcohol. And you might then take the wedge and scrape across, and it just does a little bit of lifting. You can also do this with water as well, depending on your substrate. So this is paper, but it is protected from the gesso, so you might want to explore further with that. And just having a nice flat background and learning to keep it flat. But for some reason, I love these sections, but my sections always seem to emulate sky and land or something. I just can't get away from that. It's probably because of the higher contrast or my use of the black. That's okay. We'll learn to slowly, over time, change that. So I'm just showing you with my lights the texture. And this page turned out a lot, it was much thicker, and that's what I really love. So we're thoroughly dry now. And while you're drying too, you're probably thinking about, okay, what are we going to do next? So I'm cleaning off my brush. I'm trying to keep the values very subtle. So I'm just seeing what the teal does, and it's much more opaque than the manganese blue. So I'm taking the brayer and just trying to lift some of that off. And I'm sticking with blue these last few pages just because I need to explore what I can do with it, what I see. I know what other artists are doing with it. Excuse me. But then trying to, just learn and discern. That's a new one. Learn and discern. So I know that black is going to end up in here, but oh, good. So I'm using a gray, and I'm just putting that at the top. And you'll notice how I'm moving that brush. I don't know where this, just really moving it differently. This page gets really ugly. And that's another thing that I'm learning. It's like, oh, wow, this is just totally, oh, I know what that is. That's raw sienna. So it's more of a brown. So I added a little black to it. And what we want to do is treat the whole painting with whatever it is you're doing. You can think of thirds, looking at it and just sort of uniformly adding that value. And so it's very warm. Not really the effect I was thinking of. I think a much better choice would have been Payne's Gray, and I'm totally low in it right now. And I think when I purchase my new bottle of Payne's Gray, we are going to start the same way, but just use some different values. So that was a little bit of burnt sienna, I believe, which is much warmer. So this, going from the manganese blue to some really warm, much warmer tones. And you'll notice the red in the sienna is really creating an interesting green. I don't know if it picks up in the video with this lens, but it turns out really interesting in the end. And I don't usually use green. I just like I don't choose it, but I don't mind if it happens, if it's very similar to some of the tones or hues that are there. So I'm just thinking in thirds again, covering up. And what I've discovered too is when you have really dark or high contrast underneath, you start your first layers. And even if you wanted to just use the black and white instead of the manganese blue like I started, and then end up covering those, you can create some really interesting shadows of the underlayer, way in the distance or way underneath that. If you're interested in that effect, which I am, so I'm going to keep that in mind for future abstracts. So lightening up that top. So I'm trying to go from the bottom dark to light, so which creates a certain feeling, a certain energy, and it also draws the viewer's eye upward. So we're always thinking over, up, across, down, and just getting that real interesting action happening. So now we can see some really interesting layers beginning to appear here. That's a real, like a gray. I've shown you the gray that I use. It's such a beautiful gray. You know, you can make your own gray. And that's what we should always do too, is start learning and exploring different color mixing, rather than always using it right from the bottle. So you get more of that uniformity, and it just looks better. The colors are related to each other, and that's going to be in upcoming videos. So this video is about 30 minutes. I think it's 29 minutes. It might be even more, because I found a section that the beginning, that, wait, what happened? So I just inserted that, and stick around to the end. And if you are enjoying this type of work, which I am reading all of my comments all the time, and it seems to be inspiring people who aren't used to abstract painting, coming from realistic or landscape, because that's where I came from. And I've always wanted to learn abstract painting because it makes you go inside. And that's one of the main reasons I called my page, or my channel, my business, All My Art and Soul. Because the soul, the intuition, and our art are from both, say, realms. They speak to each other, they relate, they mirror, and it's so really neat. Wow, wasn't that a bold move? Okay, I just couldn't stand the flatness any longer, probably. And then here we go with the black on the top, but that's okay. For some reason, who knows? It just had to be there. Now, it doesn't stay dark. I do adjust with another layer or two and change that value completely. As you can see, if you've looked at the thumbnail, it's like, whoa, isn't that interesting? Just because I've done so many and I want to do something different. So I realized, wow, I really love that manganese blue, how it can really cool off that upper layer and have a more blending, more transition from the blue to the black. So now we've got, how many sections do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 now. So that's pretty cool. And then just experimenting with different marks, trying to bring up that texture. So I really like what this palette did. And then I go, oh, okay, let's just keep doing some more, especially with that manganese blue. It's my favorite blue. And I guess it contrasts so nicely with my oranges and my ambers and yellow oxide that I love so. And then here comes the real opaque, which is so different from the rest of that section, but similar in value. So I'll scratch it out, see if I like it, and you might, I could have either rolled it with a brayer, which I did, or lifted it with some paper, and then stamped that, pressed that in other areas, which is a pretty interesting way to do it because it's so unpredictable. And here comes my paint tool, because now I want to see if I can, what a very straight edge on that bottom section would look. Oh, not bad. Not bad. And I notice I have to be careful when I'm cleaning that metal edge here because it's pretty sharp. So I'm thinking, okay, I think I want a very clean edge instead of that. Yeah, that's not bad. Not as clean edged. This paint tool doesn't do a job as well as I'd like. Maybe because it's on a sketchbook, or I have another tool that I'm going to try using more. And so lightening up that edge, and then here I go with my brush anyway. But I'm liking that. And then I take care of that lighter blue section on the right. Here comes some yellow. Whoa. Down on the bottom. I hope not. Oh. So I'm creating like that antique, that patina green. And of course, on the palette it looked great. But once you fire it over there, it just needs to be darker. So, much better. So I'm just playing around with different tones of blues, patina, and trying to maintain this whole bottom section of this page and keep it together just with some subtle value differences. And you can either roll with your brayer or lift with paper. I think I'll show that more. Yeah, so there I'm counting my sections. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5. That's good. I like an odd number. So then what is that? A beautiful rusty, and I'm making more a better orange with it. It is the golden, super transparent. And so instead of black, which I did in the past on some pages, I gave it a heavier base with a more of an earthy feel. The nickel Azo Gold, that's what that is, nickel Azo Gold. And so if you noticed, I have not even thought about any collage pieces at this stage. I'm wanting to move more into paint, and I'm even thinking of taping off sections to make the painted area look like a collage piece of paper, or to emulate it, even have a whole different thickness. So I forget where I got that idea. I think I got that idea from some other artists who use canvas, and they tear their canvases and then glue them on a canvas with other other abstract areas, which seems to me like a lot of work, but it's a really cool effect. So drawing up these sections, I'm really liking how they're turning out. But again, I don't keep the dark section there. I do decide to change it just because I needed to do something different. So I will be coming in with some stencils and gray, a beautiful gray layer that's going to go right over top of that dark section. But first, I'm going to add some collage pieces, thinking of some texture now. That would have looked good. That still would have worked, now that I'm really learning to like green a bit more. But for some reason, I didn't end up choosing it. So I'm just searching through all my scraps, which I've shown you that I keep just above, out of the camera view, on my big art table. Thinking of that would have worked too. Maybe with some darker blue, even black. But I've done that enough, and I just wanted something different. This page is calling for something different, so let's wait and see what I end up choosing at this stage of the game. And I love that neutral tissue paper piece at the side. So you might want to keep a bin of all your small little scraps, especially if you want, if the piece just needs a small one for the scale, which then makes it look bigger than it really is. It feels like this piece could be a big canvas. It wouldn't matter because of the scale that I use, and that's, I think, the feeling that other artists might be thinking and using. So again, this piece is the newsprint paper, initially stenciled, maybe even some ghost prints off a jelly print, and then rolled on top, just to get a really nice texture going. So then what I do here is I make these long strips that, of course, are now falling in the paint in my palette on the right there, and now I'm gathering some possibilities. And that little circle there ends up in my piece. So it's really interesting how it finally ends up. Liking that, but now we've got an abstract landscape, and I just, there's nothing wrong with an abstract landscape. That piece would have looked pretty cool, though. Right there is good. So I'm moving it all around. Not bad. Better. Warm. So there's that singular. So I just, okay. So I take it off of there because it's bugging me, because it's making me think too much like the other pieces. So I just move it to the side. And then I'm thinking, okay, what have I seen? Why do I have to go all the way across? Why can't I just have a section with a nice clean edge that I line up and fits right there on the lower right? And I do believe that's what I end up doing. But then I end up putting some interesting stencil layers on top. So using the glue, not using it on top. If I'm going to use something on top, I'm remembering to use the heavy gel gloss medium. And now I fired that back in the pile. No, that isn't going to work. Not bad. Not bad. It just doesn't work. And this page for the first time had 2 sittings, mostly because the paint was super thick and really needed some good drying time. And the other reason, I just needed to step away from it. It was just one of those days, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, sometimes we want to have an art journal that's just, 20 minutes, and I forget the artist, she does that. If she touches it, she has to pick it up and use it. And she's from Great Britain area. I followed her. I'll think of her name in a while. So as you can see, once you put that collage piece there, the blue, then it just looks like two different paintings. It's too different. So here I go. I said, I can't stand this. I just can't stand the black because it's making me think it's too like land and sky. So what do I need to do? I need to bring the value of that upper section closer to the value of the blue, the light and dark. Just so I've maintained that flatness throughout the entire piece. Had some uniformity. So it's still wet, didn't care, had to happen. I can still remember frustration. So I let that dry, and I think I do a little scratching, which I love. So here's some great stuff. I thought, oh yeah. So I used the needle this time because I wanted some really thin lines, but that would scratch right through. And then brushing some of them, flattening them. and lightening that top some more. Really like that idea. So still achieving, what did I do? Oh, I think I accidentally went into the umber, or that's some of the paint underneath. So obviously that layer needs to dry before I add some more. Oh, here I go with the brayer. The brayers, see how the more I pressed, but if I stayed light, that tone or value would have stayed on the top, and you can see the wrinkles happening, but they go away once this dries. Okay. Interesting texture. Really like that. So, drawing this layer finally, and that texture really adds to the top because it does glide the eye across instead of going up and right off of the page. And then you'll see me come in with some geometric shapes. I think I used the hexagon, which really creates an interesting layer because I used then the blue, which is a layer below, over the gray as sort of like a transition. And so just testing that, and you can see all the possible pieces that I've made on the left. But at this point, I only wanted working with color ratios as well. Just a little bit of orange, not overdoing with the contrast. And then if you do, then it's just so busy. It just looks like, how does Nicholas Wilton say, a garage sale. No, we don't want a garage sale. We want it just to contrast enough to make the blue look more blue, just with that little bit like, whoa. Really? I don't think so. Who knows? Purple. So I know what I'm thinking here. There has to be, what did some other artists call it? The life of the party. There has to be something that stands out, no matter what it is. Contrast, dark, marks, whatever it is. But near the end, so if you stick to the end, you'll see what I end up doing. And I really like this piece. It's closer to the feel that I've been looking for. So I know I'm not using those. So get them out of there because they're having an influence. That's not bad. Not bad. Still too neutral. I don't end up using that. And what's really looking good, the higher you go up, is the black and white with the light gray background. So let's see. Yes. So using the same tone, or very similar value, I should call it by its proper name, across. And I know I've used these circles many times, but they're important to my work. And I love how thick they are. I used the really thick paint, and I really waited until they were dry so I wouldn't smudge them. As you can see, really getting them dry here. And the opaque paint contrasting with the very translucent or transparent layers is another really cool difference to use. So you might want to keep that in mind. But using it sparingly, using it with the same value so that the texture difference shows up rather than a contrast of color. And all of these things that I'm talking about only have, there we go. We jumped into the stenciling. And that was a really, really cool effect. Same blue, that same hexagon stencil, but I chose to put it across, and that's where I stopped and I let it dry because there was so much paint. And now this is the final sitting. I peeled off the yellow paint because at that point I wanted to see what it looked like without that contrast, without that electric yellow staring me in the face. And as you can see below, the little stencil girl dot, organic dots that are all different, I use at the bottom, but I use them sort of like an angle, starting in the lower right and ending up, going over across to the left. And here I'm just putting out a tiny bit of paint, which I didn't even end up using either, which is interesting. So as you can see, here's the circle, and you can see a piece of the deli paper that I ordered off of Amazon. It comes in 50 sheets, and it is definitely a lot stronger than tracing paper, but so transparent once you, after you make marks on it or do anything to it, and it's really, really cool. The other artist, Louise Fletcher. She is an amazing abstract, collage, mixed media, and but she's way ahead, and that's okay. We're all on our own journey, and so are you. So there's those triangles, and I put that to the side. I never ended up using them, but I still believe they would add, without being too much, if I used maybe a lighter value or a slightly darker value under where that circle is, making the eye come down. In this piece, I chose to use the China marker with just those vertical lines. And this is the piece what I did when I left this piece and just let it dry, I chose these pieces that aren't glued or anything, and I sat them where I thought I would like them. And then every time I went by my page to see if I still liked that idea, and I did. So I'm just being careful because, of course, the tape is removed. I'm lining that piece of deli wrap paper along the edge of where the tape created that edge, and that's looking really cool. And this tiny little piece, and this is using scale. It so needs to be where the gray is. And yeah, right there. I think right there is where I make my final decision. So I've switched the position, chose to make the frayed edge point down. It's beautiful. Love that. It's just enough. Now, it's the same size as the circle, but it's so different from the circle, which is on the opposite side, which I believe needed to be closer to the blue because there was just, so I'm just fooling around with which plane I want that circle. It doesn't work high, it doesn't work low, it works right there, right on that dark blue plane. Just so neat how things work. And as we learn why it works, then we're able to make more interesting choices. So here comes the China marker. And I thought, no, I've got to just put those black lines going down, but those triangles would have looked very interesting. I was worried that they would conflict with the circles. There'd be too much going on. And that blue line, I decided to lighten it up. I kept the energy of the blue line, and I used the teal with some white and added a little more of that turquoise, as you can see with the filbert brush there. And when I first use the paint, and I'm just guiding my hand, it's too light. So the value is too close to that row of circles above and too different from the background of the area that it's in. So I add a little more and just do this swirl and go over, just sort of retrace my steps. And I don't know if that area even needed it, but that's okay. And it might have even worked just a little darker, but that's okay too. So here's the white china marker, and I'm trying to get the eye in and around that those 6 dots, that little rectangle. And I'm really liking how the hexagons turned out. The edges are much cleaner, I think because the paint I used was much thicker. And I like that texture again with the more of an opaque on top of a layer, and you can see it behind it. So keeping mindful enough to maintain some of the previous layer to show through is also a really good idea. So I love that orange, and I thought, my little dots again, just to bring out, and of course it needs to be where the orange is, and I noticed towards the right it had a little more yellow in it, so I wanted to guide the eye across and meld that orange and yellow together. So I'm looking at this, deciding if it needs anything, and then of course my little setting up for a little bit of little tiny dots up at the top. They just add that little bit of energy, just a subtle. And then I notice, depending on how much water you use, the brush you use, those can turn out so different. Oh, there's a little piece. I end up rubbing that off. I think it's just a little piece of paper or something near that little circle. And then I decided, okay, so let's add a little more of a transition, more subtlety. And I just decide to do a little bit of dark blue dots here. And other than that, I think this is all this page needs. And I'm really liking the effect, liking that it's different, it's weighted on the bottom. And then, of course, the piece that is up, that one I'm circling right now with the china marker, balances the one on the bottom right. That's the top left. And we're getting some interesting, the eye goes around, and then I like that final line. It just needed something a little more solid. Okay, so I'm calling this one Exploring Value with a Simple Color Palette. There's so much more that was happening during this page. I hope you enjoyed this page and start exploring some of these techniques yourself. So I just couldn't leave well enough alone and decided to, what would that look like lighter? And say, nope, it just needed to be left alone. And we're done. A little bit of signing and dating at the bottom. I realized that this wasn't page number 18, it's page number 19. And so the new year is coming up, so we'll be starting some new projects. I'll be doing a lot more special artwork, larger artwork over the Christmas holidays when I have some time off, and I can't wait to share these with you. So don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and hop on over to my Facebook group, because there's some really amazing stuff that just keeps on getting shared. And thank you for everyone We're about 130 members right now and growing. So I will see you over on the Facebook group and in the next video. Goodbye.